Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And Josh, I'll invest in any project of yours as long as you're murdering people to get it done.
Oh, but we're opposed to murder on this podcast, as we
we're
say.
Pro art.
True. And that is the dilemma that we're facing in this episode, because in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we are talking about the films of 1953. And we are here at the pick from our producer, David Rosen. So, Dave, what did you pick for us?
I picked House of Wax.
House of Wax.
House of Wax.
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that the impression?
I don't think I have one. Like, Mr. Giroux, will you come? Yeah, it's not. It feels like Roger from American Dad Show or something like that.
Yeah, you're not getting it. That's Vincent Price, or it would be if Jason could do that.
Yeah, that one eludes me.
Yeah. That's okay. But he does have a very distinct voice, and this is sort of the beginning of his career as this iconic horror figure, which is what really most people know him as still. And I feel like that voice is a huge part of why he became such a big horror figure, that it just has this sort of regal yet creepy tone to it.
Yeah, I feel like either him or Paul Lynde could have been center square or horror icon. So.
Yeah, all right. So this movie stars Vincent Price as Henry Jarrett, who is a sculptor in wax. And as Jason implied, he uses some unconventional means for his wax sculptures that do involve murdering people and kind of covering them in wax or using parts of them within the wax sculptures. I don't know if we got all the exact mechanics of it, but it's still good for the people.
No, unless, they want to live forever as a piece of art.
Who wants that, though?
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he needed to like put an ad on Craigslist or something and find the right kind of sex fetishist who would go for this.
Yeah, if like perfect. He could have met the people from like Crimes of the Future or something like that. I think we could have been onto something.
Quite the crossover. What if David Cronenberg directed the latest House of Wax remake?
Crimes of Wax?
Crimes of Wax.
I'm in. I want to see that.
Yeah, sadly, this movie is not nearly as kinky as we're describing there. It was, however, it's interesting to me, and I think this was completely by accident, that we started this season with the first movie ever shown in CinemaScope, The Robe, which was not the reason we talked about it. It was the box office champion, so we picked it for that reason. And this movie is really the first major wide 3D release. It is the first color 3D film from a major studio. It was from Warner Brothers, and it followed the first 3D release of any kind, really, called Wanna Devil. And so that, I don't think, Dave, was that a reason that you picked this, or was that just sort of a coincidence?
It was a total coincidence, but I do have a quick story in regards to that being the first 3D movie. My dad, when I told him we were talking about this on the podcast, he said to tell you guys how scary the ping pong ball scene was when they all went on opening weekend to see this movie.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. That must have been amazing, not knowing how that technology would work. And wait, you mean the paddle ball scene?
The paddle ball with the ball bouncing at the screen.
Which I don't think is meant to be scary.
No, but fun, but
Right.
Yeah, but there's a paddle ball barker outside of the House of Wax, and he gets people interested by doing all these cool tricks. And, if you've never seen 3D before and these paddle balls are like flying towards your head, I could see that as something that would be scary. But that was a cool part of the movie, considering, the format that we're taking here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing that you watch it now in 2D and it's just kind of dumb. But I'm sure I think about, you all those stories about the early days of cinema when the Lumiere brothers showed the train arriving at the station and people all thought it was going to hit them or something like that. Maybe that was kind of like what your dad experienced with the paddle balls.
I love, Josh, how you say it's kind of dumb, as if you're some paddleball expert who could out paddle this man with his balls.
I just mean that it's clearly there for the sole purpose of having something come out the screen It doesn't have anything to do with the story. It's silly. It's not scary, and nor is it meant to be scary.
But I mean, can we just say, isn't that a tradition in 3D movies? You know, putting stuff in there just to get you that rise from your seat.
It is, yes, which is a dubious tradition, but it absolutely is a tradition. And this movie was a success. I mean, it basically kicked off this huge boom in 3D movies that is one of the signature characteristics of 1950s movies, I think. And so this movie grossed $23.75 million, although that, I believe, includes some re-releases on its budget of $1 million. But even without those re-releases, it was the sixth highest grossing movie of 1953. So quite successful. It is a remake of another Warner Brothers film from 1933 called Mystery of the Wax Museum, all of which is drawn from a short story and a play called The Waxworks by Charles S. Belden. And I actually watched Mystery of the Wax Museum and kind of almost liked it a little more than this one. I would say.
You face Dave.
the story is very, very, very similar. And I think we'll talk about the 2005 remake later, which has almost nothing to do with this story. But the 33 version and then this version follow the story beats pretty closely. There's even some dialogue that's taken verbatim from that version that's in this version. Although the disappointing thing is the essentially the main character, aside from the villain in that version, is this sassy girl reporter played by Glenda Farrell, who is the absolute best thing about that movie and is not a character at all in this version. But it's fun if you get a chance to see it, if you like House of Wax.
Are there any paddleball tricks?
There are not, because it was not in 3D. Although it's in color in 1933. It's in an early, so in a way it was sort of technologically pioneering as well. It's in an early like 2-strip Technicolor. So the colors it's not as vibrant as this movie or as color movies are later. And it almost adds to sort of the eeriness of it because it's got this minimal, like almost tinted looking color to it. So it's pretty cool, actually.
Josh, you mentioned the re-releases 1971 and also in the 1980s.
Yes. And of course, the 1980s is after the 50s and maybe the, early 2010s or something is the biggest 3D boom in theaters, and lots of movies in the 1980s with stuff popping out of the screen at you annoyingly.
Yeah, we're in a downtime for 3D. Maybe, as we're recording this, the Avatar sequel is, taking over the world. We'll see if that leads to a resurgence in 3D.
I wonder. Yeah, because it seemed like the first Avatar was part of that, what led to a really big boom like 10, 15 years ago. And I don't know if that's going to happen again. I personally am happy to not have any more 3D.
Well,
films.
didn't they made so many bad movies or movies that didn't utilize the technology, right? They were either retrofitted for it or just had no point in it. So, I can see why audience is tired of it, Josh.
Right. And I think that's probably something that happened in the 50s and the 80s as well, that, it gets overused and then people get bored of it. So given that this was such an important new technology, just like all of the reviews of The Robe focusing on CinemaScope, basically all the reviews that I found of this movie focus on the 3D aspect, as well as the sound, which was also a new process that was called like Warner Phonic or something like that. It's basically surround sound.
It's stereophonic sound.
Yeah, but it was something that unlike 3D, which is still sort of a sporadic thing, that's something that we take for granted that we're going to have that kind of sound in a decent movie theater. But at the time, this was also new. So not surprisingly, all these stodgy critics did not like it. Not only were they very skeptical of the technology, but didn't really care for the movie as a movie either. So
I can't wait to hear from Louisa May Rutherford and hear what she had to say about it.
Well, we do have Bosley Crowther, who really hated this. And I had to kind of cherry pick here because he just had so much negativity to share. So Bosley Crowther in the New York Times said, "This mixture of antique melodrama, three-dimensional photography, ghoulish sensationalism, and so-called directed sound raises so many serious questions of achievement and responsibility that a friend of the motion picture medium has ample reason to be baffled and concerned. It isn't only that the story projected in this first major whack with 3D is a bundle of horrifying claptrap that was cheap and obvious 20 years ago, nor is it that the stereo photography, while more effective than any other yet seen in theaters, is of but moderate advantage to the film. The most frightening thing about this picture is the thought of the imitation it will encourage if it proves to draw customers to the theater, which it more than likely will do. Some may accept this dismal prospect with the same casualness they accord the idiocies and eventually comic monstrosities of the film, but not so this reviewer.
Dave, can we just say, like, is Josh just killing it on these emotional, resonance on these reviewers? Like, you should take this on tour, Josh. I keep telling you this. So.
I had to capture that. I'm telling you, if you read the whole review, Bosley Crowther sounds like he's foaming at the mouth as he's writing this review.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was really good, Josh.
Well, thank you.
It made me just want to give Bosley Crowther a Valium and like, dude, calm down. It's like at the very worst, it's a gimmicky horror movie, right? And it's fine as a gimmicky horror movie. I don't love this movie, but that's fine. Like, it's not destroying cinema. And honestly, like, I felt like he was just like chiding a young Roger Corman, like, you're going to do all these things and I don't like it. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, we know that it was just a gimmick and that it petered out, right, within a few years in the 1950s. But on the other hand, I feel like he sounds not dissimilar from a lot of critics who bemoan various developments currently, whether that was the return of 3D in the 2010s, or it's the advent of streaming, or any technological developments that seem like they're going to destroy cinema potentially.
You should write out Bosley Crowther style reviews for Oculus Rift projects.
Yeah, something like that, or interactive things on Netflix, or I don't know. So Jay Carmody in the Washington Evening Star also thought this was destroying cinema, although I tried to focus a little more on the less sensationalistic things that he had to say. So he said, in making House of Wax, the second of the full-length 3D films, Warner Brothers bears more than a faint resemblance to a man making a beautiful swan dive into an empty swimming pool. The vital ingredient the company forgot was a story worthy of the new technical process on display. This leaves House of Wax with a wildly disheveled look, in spite of the fact that the actual camera work represents a considerable improvement over Buona Devil, which was the first 3D movie. As a swatch of the future, viewed through Polaroid glasses, it does have its dramatic aspects, no matter how hard those are to perceive through the crust of the ancient screen script.
Has anyone seen Buona Devil?
I have not, and I briefly looked to see if it was streaming, even though I probably wouldn't have time to watch it, but I did not. It's not streaming.
Yeah, Josh, I looked too, even though I didn't have any time because I was busy doing cool things.
I was busy watching the House of Wax remake.
It's interesting that you wonder what the reviews would have been had they responded to the story, right? Because, like, The Robe, as you said, CinemaScope, right? They talked about how that was so effective for the film. And now this is like the technology they're saying is ineffective. But as we know, like, looking forward, everyone credits the director, Andre de Toth, because he couldn't see 3D is a very, doing a very good job of actually making a film.
Right. And I kind of think that it's funny that they focus on the fact that this is not the right story, or it's not worthy of this presentation or something like that, because of the way that 3D developed and 3D was used so extensively in like kind of schlocky horror movies, that's what we sort of associate it with. But I feel like it is a fun little, maybe sort of throwback horror movie that is perfect for this. And there's another review that I didn't end up quoting because it wasn't overall as interesting, but another reviewer talked extensively about how if 3D is supposed to make things more realistic looking, that why would you make a movie that's in like a period piece and like hokey and not realistic, as if I think she was expecting 3D to be used for like naturalistic dramas or something.
My dinner with Andre, now in 3D.
Right. And that sounds absurd to us, but at the time, there was no precedent for what it would be used for. So
I
think it's interesting that's obviously it went in the very opposite direction. And now we think of a 3D movie would only be for something like Avatar. That's a huge spectacle.
Right. Don't you want to see like the next installment of the Before the Sunrise trilogy, which would be now a quartet in 3D? Wow. It really looks like Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy are walking down the street next to us.
I mean, on the other hand, like, what if Richard Linklater took that seriously and did it? Like, how would that work out?
It would be great because we've seen what he does with rotoscoping, right?
Right. So I just think it's fascinating, just like with CinemaScope or any of these things, to see what people were imagining of this technology at a time when they didn't know how it would go.
Yeah. Do you think there were some who were like, I wish the robe was in 3D? I really wanted to get up close and personal with that crucifixion.
I'm sure there were. As we've established, critics were crazy for the robe for some reason.
Of the movies that we watched this season, I know I didn't like the movie and it was my pick, but the Wild One, had it been more focused on the actual motorcycling along the roads, that could have been a cool 3D element.
Yeah, totally. And would have added to the sort of sensationalistic nature of that movie. And had it been made like a few years later when it was at the height of 3D, it could have ended up actually being in 3D. So I did try to find something more positive. Edwin Shallert in the Los Angeles Times said, Warner Brothers has smartly proffered a reliable old thriller with many inherent illusions and effects as its first exhibit to show off the three-dimension system. If you aren't hit with a ball, a chair, or stabbed with a sword in some time in the proceedings, you may consider yourself either fortunate or unfortunate, according to your addiction to gruesome excitement. House of Wax doesn't spare anything along this line, but it seldom becomes too extreme, except it will undoubtedly give children nightmares. Nor is anything like a critical appraisal of this innovative film fitting, because 3D still is so much in the experimental phase. The show will cause intense excitement among audiences, unquestionably. So he is reserving his critical judgment, I guess. And I think his perspective here that this is the right material for 3D. They trotted out this reliable old thriller with some thrills and chills to make the 3D pop or whatever. I think that makes sense for what you want with a 3D movie.
Yeah, the first, I wonder what you guys recall, but the first movie I remember seeing in 3D was Captain EO at Epcot Center, right? And it was Michael Jackson and a little Ewok type thing. And it was 20 minutes and that creature was always flying at you and Michael Jackson was dancing. And was that John Landis? Was that his, or I don't even know who directed it.
Probably, yeah, that sounds right.
But yeah, so like, you're utilizing the technology for different things, I guess. What was the first one you ever saw in 3D? Do you remember?
I don't know. It was Francis Ford Coppola who directed Captain EO.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's good. He's good. I like him.
Yeah.
Look for Captain EO, the final director's cut, coming to an Epcot Center near next year.
I definitely saw Captain EO, although I never went to Epcot Center, so I must have been at the California Disneyland also, which I went to a lot as a kid growing up in California. I don't know if that was the first 3D movie I ever saw. I definitely did see that as a kid, and I feel like we were probably too young to catch the 3D boom of like the early 80s, which was mostly about horror movies that we would have been too young to see. So it may have been that, because really there was very little 3D wise until, again, the boom that was around the time of Avatar. So that sounds right. I don't know. Dave, do you remember?
I know I went and saw whatever the Nightmare on Elm Street one was that was in 3D.
Oh, I saw that too. It was the Freddy's Dead. Yes,
Freddy's Dead?
Yes, I did see that. That might have been mine as well. Yeah.
Okay. That's a fun one.
So, and that's a terrible movie.
Yeah, very much so.
Dave, your parents didn't take you to see like Emmanuel in Paris in 3D.
Possibly. I just don't remember.
Yeah, there was. I haven't looked into it, but I'm sure, especially in the 70s and 80s, there must have been 3D porn in the theaters, right?
Now we're talking, Josh.
Yeah. What would Vincent Price say about 3D porn?
Oh, look at all that splooge.
All right, your impression still sucks.
Still not good.
I feel like I at least got the attitude, but you know.
So Dave, you picked this movie. Did you see this as a kid?
I don't remember. It's one of those movies that I feel like I might have seen, but I don't remember. But I just love Vincent Price, like just as a figure in horror movies. And of course, you know, in Michael Jackson's Thriller, like I just love him. And so when I saw this as being something from 1953, I was like, we got to go with that.
Yeah, he's great. And I think he elevates any of these schlocky movies that he's in with his presence.
And quite a good host of The Muppet Show.
I'm glad we can talk about the Muppets again.
Yeah, I think it was like a Halloween style episode.
No, that makes sense. That's totally something that I could see him doing. So had you seen this one before, Jason?
Nope, Josh. Really, other than the Muppet Show, probably haven't seen anything with Vincent Price. So.
Oh, wow. Did you never see like Edward Scissorhands?
Oh, yeah, I love Edward Scissorhands.
Okay, yeah.
But that's Johnny Depp who plays him, Josh.
Yes, but Vincent Price plays his creator, and of course it plays on his image as a horror guy.
Yeah.
I'd seen a lot of Vincent Price horror movies, the Roger Corman stuff and William Castle stuff that he's done, but I had not seen this one. So it was fun to check that out and see the origin of his persona there.
I'm going to go totally off the rails here, Josh, but I heard that first song from Johnny Depp and Jeff Beck, and it is so good. I couldn't believe this. I'm like, this has far better than it has any right to be. So awesome movie or recommendation. Check out the Johnny Depp, Jeff Beck collaboration.
All right. You definitely were correct about going far off the rails on that one. So do you have anything about the film House of Wax and its background that you would like to share, Jason?
Dude, it's 88 minutes long and there was an intermission. Let's talk about that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, well, it was because the 3D technology required changing the reels in the projector in the middle of the movie.
Okay, we talked about it.
All right. Well, then we'll come back and
after our first intermission.
Yes, exactly. We'll do our intermission. We'll change the reels and we'll talk about our general thoughts on House of Wax. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this season on the films of 1953, we're talking about
House of Wax starring Vincent Price. Ooh.
That was your impression just keeps getting worse.
Archie, what are you doing? I just made him Edith Bunker.
Sure. Yes. House of Wax. So, Dave, this is your pick, and you said you had vague memories of it at best. So, how did you feel about watching it now?
I thought it was great. Like, I had so much fun with it. It's very ridiculous and like it's so silly. And you kind of have to watch it through the lens of like it being a 50s horror movie and like, you know, being very kind of hokey. But it's like being in like one of those fun like haunted house tours like at Halloween time, you know, and it's so like the production design is so much fun, like all the wax statues and all that stuff. There's a lot of fun here. And he, like I said, he is just great to watch.
He is. And I think he carries it. In fact, he's so good that it really highlights how boring everyone else is in this movie.
It really does ground everything, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, because he's the villain. And so for long stretches of the movie, he's not there. And we have to watch Phyllis Kirk as the sort of bland, upstanding female lead of this film. And Paul Picerni as her really even more bland, like, boyfriend.
And you're saying upstanding, but I question that relationship because when we first meet the boyfriend, Scott, right? He's like with his wife. And then we never see the wife again, but we see those two together all the time, including going to the opening, you know?
Wait, I thought that was his mother.
No. Oh, well, that's even weirder. No, I think it was his wife.
Wait a minute. I've completely misunderstood this film then.
Scott lives with his wife, right, Dave?
I'm not sure now. Now the way that you're describing it.
Either way, he's banging the lady.
Yeah. Okay. Well. For whatever reason, for whatever it's worth, Wikipedia says it's his mother, but Wikipedia can be wrong. But yet, my impression was that she. Okay. So what happens here is Sue, Phyllis Kirk's character, witnesses her roommate Kathy, played by Carolyn Jones, is dead. She's been murdered by the mysterious disfigured man who, spoiler, is Vincent Price. Sorry. And so she's traumatized and scared, and the man is chasing her. And so she runs to Scott's house and knocks on the door, and they kind of take her in and are keeping her there to keep her safe. And I thought this was completely upstanding, right? This guy is her fiance or boyfriend or something, and he lives with his mother, which is what you would do in 1900 if you were an upper class doofus.
And having sex with her.
I did not get that impression at all. So I don't know where you got this, Jason.
I mean,
you
Josh,
briefly threw my entire understanding of this movie into chaos.
Film is
I'm right.
An interpretive medium. And, what I interpret is this guy's having sex with the lady he lives with, who may or may not be his mother. And, if there was a wax statue that he found attractive, I don't doubt that he'd stick it in that too.
All right. Well, like we were saying earlier, this movie, that's the David Cronenberg House of Wax. This is not as kinky as it could be.
Anyway, he is a boring character. They do go to a can show once, which she's like, oh, this is too racy for me. And he's like, what are you talking about? I banged my mom. And then they go back and they go to the House of Wax, and she uncovers that Kathy is Joan of Arc, right? Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
And then Vincent Price is like, yeah, I'm going to make you Marie Antoinette. And when I say that, I mean, I'm going to do the murder on you and make you Marie Antoinette.
Yes. He wants to take real people and make them into the wax figures. He's done this with his business partner, who was attempting to burn down the previous wax museum for the insurance money. And he's done this with some random attorney or politician or something that's gone missing. And he's turned that guy into John Wilkes Booth. So that's his jam, I guess, is turning people into wax sculptures. And
he can't use his hands anymore because of the accident. So he's got these two assistants. One, Igor, played by a young Charles Bronson.
Right.
I'm going to Emmett's Fix-It Shop to fix Emmett.
Yes.
One of the classic Simpson lines.
That is a classic.
Yeah. But I didn't know that was Charles Bronson. Did you?
No, I didn't definitely recognize him, and he's not credited. He's as Bronson. He's credited as Charles Buczynski, I think, which is his real name.
Yeah,
and was the name he used in some of his early roles. So no, I didn't realize that at all. And he doesn't sound like you just made him sound, because I don't know if he's developed his Bronsonness yet.
I mean, they could have remade the House of Wax with him as the good guy.
As the good guy, or as the Vincent Price role?
No, as the good guy who's going to stop it. Right. There's a house of wax and it needs to tumble down or something, it would have been fun. So,
yeah, I suppose. But yeah, he doesn't sound like that in this movie because his character is mute. So that's probably the reason why.
A waste of the Charles Bronson voice for sure.
Indeed. And then his other assistant, who is, I forget what his name was, but he's a drunk, and the police are able to break him by refusing to give him alcohol until he
how simple.
I love that.
What a simple hey, you want some hooch? Just tell us who did it.
Yeah, well, this is a remnant. It's interesting having watched the 1933 version, because that whole bit, which is ridiculous in this film, is a remnant of the fact that 1933 movie is a pre-code movie. And so in that movie, the character is a heroin addict, which makes a lot of sense.
That would have been awesome.
Wow. But they can't do that in 1953 with the production code, so they have to make him an alcoholic.
But also, if he was an alcoholic, in 1933, I would have bought that more too, because of Prohibition. And, also after the Great Depression and everything, the need for alcohol would have been maybe stronger with that character. Although, don't get me wrong, Josh, I'm not underestimating the power of alcoholism in any era.
Thank you for that sobering public service announcement. There actually is a bootlegging subplot in the 1933 version talking about prohibition, so it does come up. But the character that they use his addiction to break him is addicted to heroin, so it seems a bit more convincing. But Jason, I wanted to also come back to the can-can dance that you're describing, and of course, the reason that is in the movie is like the paddleball guy, solely for the purpose of 3D. And seeing these dancing girls kick their legs at you. And you were sort of dismissive of it, but this was so scandalous in 1953. Looking through like newspaper archives to find reviews, I found at least as many, if not more, articles that were just about the can-can dance and that it was in this movie and how big a deal that was.
Wow. Man, there must have been a lot of sexual frustration in the 50s.
Yes.
Yep.
That is an understatement.
Yeah. No, I know. Obviously, it's there to titillate. So.
Yes, it is. So, I think this movie is, even though it's only 88 minutes, it is a bit slow, especially in the middle. But I think it's got a lot of really good atmosphere. And just that's something I think that Andre de Toth, the director, has done a good job creating. As Dave was saying, the production design, all the wax figures, it looks creepy and impressive. There's all these like fog shrouded streets which is, I feel like New York is not really this foggy, but they just put fog.
Yeah, it definitely looked like Jack the Ripper London or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. And it takes place in 1900, so everybody's in horse-drawn carriages and stuff like that. It gives it this old-timey feel. Right. So everyone, I thought it was fun.
All the investors, I shall invest in your project after a trip to Egypt, and everything. The best shot for me, Josh, was when Sue finally smashes the Vincent Price character in the head and that wax mold comes off and we see his disfigured face. I thought that was a really good reveal.
Yeah, it was. And maybe because it's just plot-wise, it's very obvious who is this disfigured guy running around stealing bodies going to be. Obviously, it must be Vincent Price, but like makeup-wise, it doesn't really look like him. So you could theoretically assume that it was someone else. Like the makeup job in this film is, you think?
No, not going to give you that one. The makeup's good, but he's the guy the whole time. So
he's the guy because that's obvious from a plot standpoint. But I feel like just looking at him, you could believe he was someone else. No.
Nope.
I would say I wouldn't think that he was someone else, but I didn't think the movie could pull off a trick that well. Being from the 50s, like I thought it was a really cool visual effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dave's right.
I
you're
felt
wrong,
like
Josh.
All right. Okay. I'm a dupe, I guess, for this film. Oh, that's fair. I will say that probably audiences in the 50s maybe were more likely to be duped like me. I'm as unsophisticated as 1950s movie-going audiences who had never seen a 3D movie before.
Well, it's a good thing we held your hand through From Here to Eternity, because that must have been a real hardship for you then.
Yeah, I was so confused by everything.
Should we rate this thing out of 5 waxy statues?
What else could you possibly rate it out of? So, I'm gonna give it 3 wax statues. It was fun. Like I say, it gets a bit slow. It's hokey, but I had a nice time with it.
2.5 for me, which this season is an extremely high rating.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Jason still can't get on board with the films of 1953. So, Dave, how did you rate this as your pick?
I'm going with 4. I just had a really good time with it. It's certainly not perfect by any means, but it's just a fun time.
You're lying.
It is fun. I think 4 stars is maybe a little much, but
you're lying to yourself and to the audience, Dave.
It is fun. And I feel like if you saw this in like a 3D revival in a theater, it would be even more fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, but we of course,
but not 4 stars fun.
Okay.
Jason, don't lie, Dave. You and your
burn
wife
up
are
one
liars.
of my wax figures if you'd like.
Yeah, I know. Dave
stars are melting.
Yeah,
Dave watched it on his movie retreat with.
Yeah, it was a home theater
Gina.
Setup, so maybe that's giving me the extra little bump.
And nice. She loved it too. I saw on Facebook.
We both loved it.
You're both liars.
Jason, unable to believe that other people like movies.
And now our second intermission.
Yes, we'll come back and talk about the legacy of House of Wax. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1953, we are talking about our producer Dave's pick, House of Wax. And legacy-wise,
House of Wax, starring Vincent Price.
I don't even know. Is that like Richard Nixon, maybe? I don't know what that is.
I'm just doing voices now.
I feel like you just have to do the Thriller rap, and then you'll get into the spirit.
Yeah,
of Vincent Price.
it's kind of a warm-up or something to get there.
I'll work on it. Maybe in the epilogue, I'll come back with something
Thank
better.
you.
Yeah,
I'd
maybe
appreciate that.
When we talk about Edward Scissorhands someday, you'll have it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've been talking a lot already about the legacy of this film in terms of really being the catalyst for this boom in 3D that was a big deal in the 50s and then again in the 80s and the 2010s. This was re-released in 3D in 1971 and in 1982. And I feel like this is another movie that if repertory theaters or film festivals ever have like a 3D showcase, this is a standard one that they would include.
And Josh, I think you also had mentioned how this catapulted Vincent Price, who was kind of moving down the quote unquote star ladder towards like, smaller supporting roles perhaps, and reestablished him as this, the beginning of his horror icon phase.
Yeah, I mean, he'd had a supporting role, I think, in one of the Universal horror movies back in the 40s, but generally was not known for horror at all. And you look at his filmography following this film, and it is almost all horror movies. And a lot of these horror B movies, like I was saying earlier, he worked a lot with William Castle. He worked with Roger Corman, especially on all of these adaptations of Edgar Allan Poe works. And it was perfect for him. I don't know if he was one of these people who maybe resented the typecasting after a certain point, because of course he was a serious dramatic actor in a lot of these earlier films. But whether he did or he didn't, he was great at it all the way through, again, all the way through Edward Scissorhands in 1990, which was his final on-screen appearance. And people know him from Thriller. I mean, I was trying to write down sort of the notable horror movies he was in, and then I just gave up because it was way too many to name. But I love him in Theater of Blood, where he plays this actor who murders all the critics who give him bad reviews, which I thought was a fun concept, of course.
Is that how you want to go out, Josh?
Yes, I want to be murdered by someone who I give a bad review to.
My guess is it's going to be Jamie Kennedy.
Yeah, you know what? That is a very good guess. That's mine as well.
Hey, Josh, have you or Dave seen any of the pre-horror Vincent Price, dramatic roles?
Yeah, I've seen him in some. I mean, where he's usually more of a supporting player, but I forget what I've seen. Leave Her to Heaven, where he's like I think he's a lawyer, and he's usually fine in those films. But I think his presence in the horror movies is really based on this sort of florid, not overacting or hamminess necessarily, but like the voice. Again, I feel like the voice comes from those horror performances, and that's where he really comes to life. Whereas in earlier dramatic performances, at least that I've seen, it's like, sure, he's good, but you're not going to watch those movies and think, wow, Vincent Price really popped off the screen in that film.
Yeah. Do you think there's an equivalent of a Vincent Price today?
I mean, probably, the one thing I was thinking of, and this isn't in horror, but when I was talking about someone who might have resented being typecast, is Leslie Nielsen, who was this serious dramatic actor, but mostly in small parts. And then when he did The Naked Gun, he just became the parody guy for the last part of his career.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Could Bruce Campbell fit the bill maybe a little bit?
I mean, but Bruce Campbell has always, like, wasn't Evil Dead like Bruce Campbell's first role?
Yeah, but I mean, he did some other stuff, but he always keeps getting pulled back to horror throughout the years.
I mean, I think he at this point gets to do plenty of different things,
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking, Jason, probably more along the lines of someone who started as this more serious dramatic actor,
right?
And got a resurgence because of horror films. And I'm sure there is someone that I'm not thinking of.
Or action, was
right.
Dolph Lundgren like a classically trained actor? Who is it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Dolph Lundgren is famously like, doesn't he have like a PhD in molecular biology or something like that?
And I had always heard this, as as an actor myself, fellas, that Sean William Scott was supposedly like this amazing dramatic actor in, acting classes. And he was, going to be that next hot dramatic star. And then American Pie came along and he became Stifler for most of his career. But yeah, no, that's what I mean. But we didn't know him as a dramatic type beforehand, as opposed to like Leslie Nielsen, like you're saying.
Right. I think Leslie Nielsen, even though it's not horror, is a decent comparison. I guess you could you mentioned action, you could say like Liam Neeson, who has this resurgence as an action star. He still gets to do serious drama, but not nearly as much.
I think he kind of just decided to lean into that, though.
Yes.
Right.
But he might be remaking The Naked Gun soon. So.
Right. There you go. And I'm sure Leslie Nielsen leaned into the comedy and Vincent Price leaned into the horror because that's where they were getting work. And why not go for it? If you're an actor, like
make that money.
Effort.
Make that money.
Indeed. So we're talking a lot about Vincent Price here because everyone else in this movie, the other actors are all boring.
Well, I mean, especially right now with the resurgence of Wednesday, which I loved on Netflix, Carolyn Jones, who played Kathy in this movie, played Morticia in the original Addams Family TV show. And she had a Best Supporting Actor nod for The Bachelor Party, not to be confused with Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, not a movie that I'm familiar with, The Bachelor Party, but she did get an Oscar nomination. She was great as Morticia, though. I mean, I even before the 90s Addams Family movies, I remember loving the Addams Family as a kid. And, she deserves to be up there with the rest of them. Yeah,
I mean, look, all these, for the most part, you have a lot of these people where it's like the first thing you read is like, for instance, I wrote down for Roy Roberts, who played Burke. He was in over 900 movies and plays. A lot of this was that time where you work. So.
Right. Yeah. Paul Picerni, who plays the boring boyfriend, was in tons of movies and TV shows as a character actor.
Yeah, The Untouchables TV show.
The TV series, The Untouchables. He was a major co-star there. Phyllis Kirk also did a lot of smaller roles.
Thin Man TV show, yeah.
Yes, with Peter Lawford as Nick, and she played Nora.
Did they have an infinite playlist?
No, but that's where those names came from, is from the Thin Man. And Frank Lovejoy, who played the detective, who gets really high billing for some reason, must have been a kind of a bigger deal. He didn't do that much because he died in 1962, so only a little bit after this. We mentioned Charles Bronson, who of all those people became the biggest star, even though in this movie he has a pretty small role.
I want to see this movie with Frank Lovejoy called Shack Out on 101. Have you heard about this movie, Josh?
No, I don't think so. I think I kind of just skimmed through his filmography.
I mean, it feels like it's real like pulpy, like romancy, just kind of schlocky, like you can really get into it. It's an isolated diner on California's 101 highway provides the backdrop of the story involving nuclear secrets, foreign spies, and federal agents. But if you look at the cover of the poster, it's got none of those things, and it's just got two people embracing and making out with each other.
Making out while nuclear secrets are at stake. So that sounds good to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but no, I mean, he was also in The Hitchhiker. Like we got it. These guys did the work, y'all.
Yeah, they did. They all did.
De Toth also directed a ton of movies.
He did, and he's kind of this journeyman that we've talked about with some of the other people in this season. This is really his most famous film. He did a couple noir films, Crime Wave and Pitfall, that are decently known as noir. And I saw one of his early films that I found fascinating that I wrote an article about a few years ago called None Shall Escape, which I saw at the TCM Festival. And it's an interesting film because it was made in, I think it was 1944, in the midst of World War II. And it's sort of a speculative film about a future in which the war has ended and there are these war crimes trials for former Nazis, which of course is what really happened. But none of that had happened when they made this film. So it was a fascinating sort of future predictive kind of movie where this Nazi is on trial and he recounts his whole career and how he got to where he was. And it was a really interesting movie. So that's obviously very, very different from House of Wax.
That does sound interesting.
So I think what we're left with here is 2005's House of Wax, which is, like I was saying, the original from 33, The Mystery of the Wax Museum, is very, very similar to this plot-wise. The 2005 version has almost nothing to do with this plot-wise, and just has the title and has a wax museum. It's not even really a museum. I don't even know what it is exactly. But Dave, you watched this one too. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I didn't think it was as bad as its reputation makes it out to be. It just felt like every mid-2000s horror movie that's just like blah. But, most of all, the fact that it doesn't really have much to do with the wax museum is the worst part about it.
Yeah, and it's very, like, you think the House of Wax is slow. That movie takes like 45 minutes to just get to anything happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's far too long for a cheesy horror movie from 2005. And Brian Van Holt, who plays the villain, is no Vincent Price. And I can never remember him as anything other than the doofus from Cougar Town. So that was tough for me to take.
His character's name is Vincent, though, by the way.
Right, but it has nothing to do with Vincent Price's character.
Yeah.
But that movie nominated for 3 Razzie Awards. So
yeah, that's kind of deserved.
Yes. Jason didn't see it.
No, I think we've really extensively covered the entire history of all things wax and houses, Josh.
I mean, that's what we do here at Awesome Movie Year.
Yes.
But, I think you're right. We can wrap this up. So that is House of Wax, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can find our wax likenesses online and on social media.
Yeah, or at least an Avatar or Oculus Rift type style meta, whatever, leave me alone. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or J Harris Comedy on all the socials. Let's see. My website, Go for Jason, needs to be murdered and encased in wax, but perhaps the new website, eatthiscomedy.com, will be here soon. Eat This Comedy and the Trivia Party, also on Instagram. Don't forget Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, awesomemovieyear.com.
I am at joshbellhateseverything.com, which may have something there soon or now, depending on when this is. Look for it, maybe. Also at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Twitter, and at Signal Bleed on Letterboxd. And check out our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what's coming up in our next episode?
Josh, it's a 1953 film, and it's a cult classic. And it's one I've never seen before, but I know you were very excited for this. Glen or Glenda?
Yeah, it'll be fun to talk about Ed Wood and Glen or Glenda. So tune in for that. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
Goodbye from Vincent Price.